Topping our list this week, the stimulus stalemate. Still no relief deal, and now titans of industry are sounding off. Walmart CEO calling on Congress to pass a stimulus bill. Doug McMillon telling CNBC this week, doing nothing is not the first and best option. He added Americans need some help. We also heard from JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon. He told investors a good, well-designed stimulus package will simply increase the chance we get better outcomes. Our next guest is a D.C. insider who believes a virus aid package may not get done until, get this, March. Kim Wallace is a fiscal policy expert, runs the KNW Group. He served as Assistant Treasury Secretary for Legislative Affairs under President Obama. Kim, welcome back to the show. Great to see you.
You as well, Melissa.
I don't think it can be disputed that the economy, that Americans need this help. So why can't anything be done until March?
Well, right now, the two sides are locked in a battle over negotiating between plans. The urgency to get something done has ebbed and flowed the last 3 months. And in the last 2 weeks, the president has changed his mind 2 or 3 times about whether or not he wanted a bill and what would be in the bill. Right now, I think both sides have decided that electoral politics are too close to try to hammer out a deal for fear of being billed a winner or a loser. I don't think it's more complicated than that.
How does the fact that there is early voting now, this election cycle, Kim, how does that factor into this whole sort of notion that there's electoral politics going on if Americans may have casted their vote already?
Well, upwards of 20 to 30 million may have cast their votes, but that means that there are scores of millions left to cast their vote. More importantly, perceptions matter a lot, and they certainly do in politics. Both parties have elements that believe doing a deal on the terms of the other party right now is worse than waiting to find out what happens in the election and then waiting to find out when you can pass legislation. That may be the lame duck, but I think you'd have to have a lot go in one direction to have lame duck legislation. For example, if the Senate were to flip to D by a net 5 or 6 seats, meaning that the Alabama seats stayed in the Democrats' hands and Georgia or South Carolina are both moved over to Democrats, then Republicans might be willing to move something out if the economic fundamentals advised it.
Hey, Kim, it's Brian Kelly. So I'm curious, you mentioned the economic fundamentals. So it seems as though that these bills tend to pass when either the stock market falls apart or there's a real bad economic outcome. So where's kind of the pain point for these politicians? What should we as investors be looking for? Frankly, I find it troubling that they're haggling while Americans are hurting. But let's look at, what is going to get these politicians to get closer together on the economic and or stock market front?
Well, economic fundamentals. And the problem with that in terms of pressure for this year, Brian, is that if we're going to have a collapse in the third quarter, more than likely we would know it by now, and that would be motivational. It hasn't been motivational to the two sides yet. But interestingly, in the last segment, you mentioned TARP. You'll recall in 2008, in the third quarter, Congress came together in a bipartisan fashion and passed not only the TARP program for financial assets, but also the Housing Emergency Assistance Program, 2 large bills. But they did those in the September timeframe. The lame duck session wasn't that impressive. And so my guess is unless you see a cratering, catastrophic events in the end of the third quarter going into the fourth quarter, it seems unlikely that the two sides are going to be put together to get a deal.
Hey, Kim, it's Tim Seymour. Thank you for joining us. My question is, when you consider the swiftness in which the first stimulus package came out and how the Fed has thrown the kitchen sink at things, is the delay also, in addition to politics, is it possibly an indictment on a failure of the first stimulus package? And to some extent, there were a lot of inefficiencies there. There's certainly a lot of people gaming the system. Is there any sense that there's a fear that they just don't have the right plan in place?
Tim, that's got to be part of it in the minds of some people. More importantly, I think, though, the size of the package that came through in the summer probably started to get some members of Congress worried that they were throwing too much money around too soon without accountability. That has a lingering effect. But my sense is what's stifling the current negotiation, and which has stifled it the last 2.5 months, are calculations around politics. You make a very good point, Tim, that whenever Washington outlays a very large sum of money in a quick period of time, we're going to have inefficiencies at best and fraud at worst. Some of that has been uncovered. I'm sure it's making some people pull back from another bill, at least temporarily.
Kim, always great to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Melissa. Have a good weekend.
You too. Kim Wallace, KNW. Guy Adami, we started this hour talking about Amazon, talking about the strong consumer, the blowout retail sales numbers that we got this morning. So what does that tell you? I mean, that the economy may be faring okay despite no stimulus, or that we're in for a shock?
Yeah, listen, let's not, and I know we say this all the time, let's not confuse the stock market with the economy. There are a lot of people out there hurting, and they look and see records for the stock market and they're saying, how could it possibly be given what we're doing right now? I mean, it's actually heartbreaking. In terms of, you mentioned Doug McMillon, of course he wants something done in the stimulus front. He runs the biggest retailer on the planet. I get what's going on here, but that's been BK's biggest concern all along, the stimulus package not going through. And I think that's probably the market is underestimating that.
Is there any thought, BK, that even March might be optimistic, since you were skeptical the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think March would be a real problem for the stock market, and probably more importantly, real problem for real Americans who have lost their job and can't put food on the table. But in terms of the stock market, it has not priced in my view, it has not priced in a March or later delay in the stimulus.
Yeah, I mean, the concern here is that the real problem for the economy may happen just around Christmas as we head into the holiday season, Tim.
Look, we heard from banks also this week, and the trends that these gents are talking about also in terms of Main Street. Part of the weakness here is that banks are reflective of Main Street. And if you listen to some of that lending, and to the extent that there was very disappointing lending, and it wasn't just commercial lending, it was certainly on the individual basis. Take a look at that as well.
All right.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.